young man from Brazil chose to dedicate his life for Palestine and become one of the leaders of the solidarity movements with Palestine. Thiago Ávila, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you, Tiago. We have to know, first of all, how your story with Palestine began.
Yes, I'm 38 years old now. And when I was 18, 19 years old, I was watching news about Palestine, and it really shocked me to see. And was actually the 2005, 2006 situation where we had the settlers evacuation of Gaza, but then right after we had the invasion and bombing of Gaza in 2006 and the invasion of Lebanon. And it really shocked me to see the injustice. It shocked me to see the disproportionality of forces. And I was actually starting to understand a little bit more about the world. And I didn't understand what Zionism was. I didn't understand what imperialism was. I just seen that they were killing children and they were bombing hospitals and they were using prohibited weapons like white phosphorus. And I said, how can this be? The same question that people have been asking themselves for 13 months now, I was asking myself almost 20 years
Yeah.
ago. And I said, this cannot be. So where is the International Court of Justice? Where is the ICC? Where is the UN? The Security Council? How come no one stopped this? And I was so frustrated about it. And I said, no, I have to read more. I have to understand more the situation. And then I started reading and I realized that it was not from that year, but it was decades and decades since 1947, 1948,
Yes.
1949, a genocide, ethnic cleansing, and then that the thing developed into an apartheid colonial state, and that it was not actually a religious war that I always read about, and people that have been fighting so hard, they will always be in war, and that there was violent religion and ethnic origin, the Arab ethnicity and the Islamic religion, which I always read through Islamophobia and through media frenzy in the West, that they were violent people and those things. And I understood it was none of that. And then I understood that it actually was the situation. It was an ideology, a racist and supremacist ideology, which was Zionism, connected to imperialism from before, from the British imperialism, and then US imperialism that was causing all of this. I was so frustrated when I understood that. I said, I've been lied to my whole life. How come this is possible? And the rest of the world still believes this lie. And so how can I be of use to that? How can I be in the service to support these people? Because it was not fair. I never made a differentiation between a Palestinian family, a Brazilian family, a family from Cuba, a family from Bangladesh, from anywhere, because we are all human. So what I was thinking is that how can I be at the service of this? And then in the end, I understood that the Palestinian struggle was actually representing most of the social justice struggle that I was getting in touch with in Brazil as well. And I said, oh, this is one of the most strategic issues of our generation. So I have to dedicate energy to it.
How?
And then I started studying a lot, looking for solidarity movements, trying to understand. It was the beginning of the BDS movement, right after the first condemnation of the colonies in the West Bank from the International Court of Justice. So the BDS movement was starting at that moment. And then I started to learn a little. I was 18 or 19 years old. The first time I understood that the Palestinian struggle was something different from what I always read or seen on TV. I'm 38 years old now, so this was almost 20 years ago. And at that moment, that was happening was the evacuation of Gaza settlements in 2005, the colonies, the Zionist colonies, and the bombing and occupation of Gaza and Lebanon in 2006. So it was very frustrating to see because for the first time I was seeing that and I was thinking, this is not what I always heard of, because what I always heard was this is a religious war. These are very violent Arab and Islamic people surrounding this innocent nation of Jewish people who suffered so much from the Holocaust and those things. And that's what I always read. But what I started to see is that was nothing like that, because what I was seeing is that they're bombing children, they're bombing hospitals, they are using prohibited weapons like white phosphorus. So this cannot be right. This cannot be what I've always been taught of, because I come from Brazil. So
Yeah.
we had a colonized education there, an imperialist education. So I started to get so curious, and I said, no, I have to learn more about this. I have to develop more weapons to understand what's going on. And so I went to historic books. I found Edward Said. I found a
Uh-huh.
lot of amazing people that show me that it was not about a religious war. It was not about an innocent people surrounded by hostile nations. It was actually about imperialism, British imperialism, and then a racist and supremacist ideology of Zionism, and then US imperialism intervening in all that, making it much worse. And it was actually decades and decades of genocide and ethnic cleansing, and then which structured itself into an apartheid and colonial state, and that the Palestinian people were actually the victims of all of that. So it shocked me because it was the exact opposite of what I've always read. I always read that United States and its allies around the world were the beacons of democracy and human rights, and I actually seen that it was not true. They were simply stealing things from people and colonizing nations, stealing oil, trying to dominate the world geopolitically. And this was so frustrating because I always seen them as heroes, the culture that I have to admire. So in Brazil, we are taught to know the neighborhoods of New York or the seas of Europe and those things, but we never learn anything about the global south or about the east of the
Mm-hmm.
world. So it was very shocking and very frustrating to see that I've been lied to my whole life. And I said, I will not accept this anymore. So I have to study, I have to learn, I have to get to know the resistance movements, I have to get to know the solidarity movements, I have to get to know
Okay.
the real history of it. And when I got in touch with the history of Palestine, I said, this is one of the most inspiring and, but at the same time, one of the biggest injustice that I've ever read about. And so I said, I have to do something about it. I'm no one, I don't know anything, I'm starting to learn all those things, but I want to be useful for that. This was 19, 20 years ago. And then I started to do the small work, like a little ant, like learn a little bit more every day, get in touch with more people every day, try to share something
To
of.
teach them about the Palestinian narrative?
Yes, because
Mm.
I was also getting in touch with the the struggles for social justice in Brazil as well. So I would go
Mm.
to indigenous territories in Brazil, to campesino communities, to places where the contradictions of the same systems that are imposed to the whole world and that create so much damage in Palestine, they're also in Brazil. The same contradictions: exploitation, oppression, destruction of nature, submission to imperialism. And so when I was in our social movements in Brazil, I would share, look, we are doing this here, but the Palestinian people are doing this there, the same. We actually had also a colonization history. We also had genocide of the indigenous population. So it was very easy for people to connect because it's like we are brothers. Most of the country from the global south. Actually, there was this thing that geographically, Palestine is not on the south hemisphere, but we call it global south geopolitically because
Yes.
of a common history, because of a common enemy as well, because of a common destiny. So in Brazil, people were very fond of Palestine. Whenever they heard the truth, it was very easy to connect. And then we started to do small things like to counter the hasbara,
Mm-hmm.
the Zionist misinformation and propaganda. And this was
We need to talk about that, Tiago.
yes, yes,
Exactly about how do you deal with Hasbara?
yes. It's very tough because
Yeah.
in Brazil, like the United States, the Zionist lobby is very strong and very aggressive. So they dominate most of the media outlets, and we have only independent media to count on. But also on independent media, they lack a lot of political education on that as well. So most of the times, because they try to fabricate consensus, they try to manufacture consent on society. So even the independent media gets on the defensive. Things like they have to pay the toll of the questions from the imperialist media, like, do you condemn the Palestinian people resisting to be free through of colonization, for example? And we were always the ones to say, of course not. Like we have our struggles in Brazil. Would you condemn indigenous people in Brazil to fight against the genocide? Would you condemn the African communities kidnapped from Africa, brought to Brazil by force and trying to be set free from slavery? Would you condemn them from resisting? And it's so obvious. Then why we would not never do that in Brazil? So why would we do that in Palestine? Why we do that anywhere else? And was actually something that also shocked me, because it's so easy for people to connect when they see when they watch a movie. They watch Star Wars, for example. They will always connect to the rebels fighting against the empire.
Yeah.
When they watch Avatar, they would cheer for the indigenous people against the invaders of the planet. When they watch Braveheart, they would cheer for the Scottish against the English. When
Or
they
V for Vendetta, for
yeah,
example.
of course,
Yeah.
because when you're out of your normal environment, it's very easy for you to distinguish right and wrong, domination and oppression. But when you're talking about real life, because of so much ideology and propaganda
Yeah.
brought into people to say, no, but this, no, I cannot put my energy on it. I cannot cheer for it because I hear so much bad things. But it's actually pretty much the same. It's colonization, it's oppression, it's domination as well. So it's something that amazes me, that how can people connect so easily when it's out of their normal environment, but in their normal environment, they are very resistant to connect with anti-hegemonic ideology and struggles and resistance. So this shocked me a lot. But fortunately, when you continue this work of showing the truth and actually showing people ways to do political action about it and how to spread the message and how to mobilize more people, people are willing to do it. When they see a just cause that has a meaning, that has a purpose in the end, it's quite nice to see.
Tiago, it's good to talk about how did you realize that the Palestinian issue connected to other issues in the world, and how you trying to teach people about that, to,
Yes,
to, to talk about that for people.
yes. You know, it took me many years after I realized what was for real the Palestinian struggle until I've been to Palestine.
Yeah.
But even before that, I was trying to see what was the relationship between the Brazilian government and the Zionists, for example. And then I learned that Brazil was a big importer of weapons from Israel.
Mhm.
And I said, why are we buying weapons from the Zionists? And then I learned that the Zionist weapons that were being bought were actually quite expensive, and that they came with a special seal that said it was those weapons are field tested. And then I started to see when they say field tested, it means they test on Palestinian bodies in Gaza, in the West Bank. And it was so sad to see that. And then when I started to realize that the use of these weapons in Brazil as well was also to promote oppression. So in Brazil, we have one of the biggest police assassinations against the black youth in the poorest communities. And it's with the same rifles that kill Palestinians, and the same drones, and the same spy softwares that they use. So we were actually giving money to genocidal industries in Israel that were used against our own people, and that was promoting a whole cycle of violence everywhere. And I said, no, we have to do something about it. And then I understood that most of our military police in Brazil that we still have, were trained by the IDF in Israel. And some police squads in Brazil would go to Israel to do training and those things. So they created so many ties, and actually what I've seen is that the systems of oppression, they are very much connected between themselves. And Zionism is a political ideology that has an expansionist project, and actually expands to Brazil. And so
Yeah.
I started to understand that the most of the problems we were seeing in Brazil about so many political violence and those things were being promoted by Zionist Christian groups, evangelical groups as well. So I said, this is way more connected than I thought. So it was something very sad to see. And I actually, when we brought a Palestinian from the West Bank to Brazil to do conference with us, so we would go make conference, and he was with us in many cities, and we took him to a favela in Brazil. And when he got to a favela, there was a military checkpoint in the favela, which is the poorest community we had in that city. And he said, this is the place where I've been outside of Palestine that looks like the most like Palestine. So I said, this is very tough. What we say in
Yeah.
Brazil is that the rifles that kill Palestinian every day are also killing our black youth in Brazil. So
So you realize that the struggling for Palestine connecting to our struggles in life, in our lives.
yes, in the end, I've seen that in order to end exploitation, oppression, and the destruction of nature, which is the three worst things that happens in our society right now through this capitalist system and imperialist system, we have to go to its core. And its core is based in the United States, but has a situation through Zionism that create a very specific situation in Palestine, which is the most strategic one, because
Yeah.
that's where the contradictions of the system are most severe right now. So it's not like we don't have violence in other countries. It's not like we don't have imperialist occupations, colonization, and those things. It's just that in that place, those forces converge in such a way that if we can defeat them there, it can be defeated anywhere else. So I always try to say that the fate and the future of the Palestinian people will very likely be the future of all people in humanity. So we have to make sure all together, led by the Palestinian people, that this future is of liberation,
Yeah.
of justice, of happiness and joy.
So your life became for Palestine, and you involved too much actually in Palestinian issue. We have to know more about your activities.
Yes. I started to mobilize committees in
Mm.
every city in Brazil we could. I started giving conference, lectures. I produce content for social media, YouTube channel. I do online courses for people as well. And we started mobilizing. So we created communication agencies to counter misinformation. We did so many demonstrations and direct actions as well. And I also joined the Freedom Flotilla, because the first time I heard about the Freedom Flotilla, it was 2010, and I only heard on the internet. I was very young, I was 23 years old, and I heard there were some people going on boats to try to break the siege of Gaza, which started in 2007.
Mhm.
And then I said, I would love to be on one of those boats. This sounds like a very inspiring mission to show people that there is a siege, because people didn't know that Gaza was being turned into an open air prison for 3 years by then in 2010. And I said, no, we have to go to spread this message. But I didn't have much money. I was very young, and my mother was sick as well. So I said, oh, this time I will not be able to go, but I'll try to spread the message of this mission as much as I can. And in
Okay.
the end, when the mission was getting close to Gaza, they got attacked by Israel, and Israel killed 10 people on that
Mhm.
mission. 10 humanitarian workers, 10 solidarity activists. And it got me so frustrated, because it went on the news for 3 days and then everyone forgot about it. And then I said, this cannot be, because they were carrying life-saving aid to Gaza, which was under total siege and blockade, which in itself, to have a siege on a place is already a war crime. It's against international
Yeah.
law. And in spite of that, they even killed the people that want to bring aid to that place. And I said, if they can do that, they can do anything. So this gave me a bigger sense of urgency, and also brought me an admiration for those people on those sea missions, that I said, I'd love to be part of that someday. And now I'm one of the organizers of the Freedom Flotilla as well, and one of the people that mobilized people to do what I could not do in 2010, like go to a boat and express solidarity in this other way, which is not the only way. It's connected to so many other ways of acting in solidarity for Palestine. I always say that to people in Brazil, because when we organize, for example, demonstrations in Brazil, we had the biggest demonstration in solidarity for Palestine last November than we ever had. So this is
Mm.
very important. Still not enough. We have to do more, but it was very important. And people are saying, but we do a demonstration and we don't get the result we need so far. And I said, yeah, but this is an important step through
Okay.
liberation. But we also have other things. We have boycott, divestment, sanctions. We can try to break the media blockade in social media, break the boycott that big techs do for us on algorithms and those things, spreading messages. We can also go disrupt armed factories. We can also go disrupt Zionist events and those things where they spread misinformation. We can camp in college campuses. We can do so many things. And the boats are one small part of a global uprising and a global strategy for liberation. So that's what I try to say now. For Palestine, my activism is mostly dedicated to the Freedom Flotilla, because this takes a lot of effort to pull up to guarantee that this mission occurs, but also based on spreading information, political education, and mobilizing the committees in the countries, in the forests, and in the cities in Brazil. So I've been traveling a lot in the last
But
12
other
months.
than Freedom Flotilla, you have tried to get into the Gaza from all over the directions.
Yes.
You have a long story about that, Tiago.
Yes, yes. 2019 was the first time I managed to go to Palestine. Many years after I've been reading and doing solidarity work for that. But I never imagined it was like that. It was way worse than what I thought. I felt like what Nelson Mandela said and Desmond Tutu said as well. After South African apartheid ended, and they went to Palestine, and they said, actually, apartheid in Palestine is very much worse than in South Africa. And I felt the same thing, and I felt everything I read, all the documentaries I've seen, all the movies, all the books I read, all the Palestinian people that I talked, nothing prepared me for that. And in 2019, I tried to enter Gaza from the east, from the occupied Palestine. And of course, I was not allowed to get in. I was no doctor, I was no solidarity worker. I was just a young man with social media work and as an internationalist and communicator. And then I was not allowed in 2019. But then in 2023, November, after the escalation of genocide, I never said that genocide started in October 2023, because the genocide goes on since Nakba, since the partition plan was disclosed by UN, and then the massacres started. And so I tried in November 2023 to go with a global conscience convoy from Egypt, people from many nationalities, with 50 trucks of food and medical aid, to cross the Rafah border to go to Gaza from the south. But we were not allowed to do that by the Egyptian government. So the Egyptian government never allowed us to even cross the Sinai Desert. So we were in line with more than 1,000 trucks that were stopped in the Sinai entrance, didn't even manage to cross the Suez Canal. And actually, there was more than 1,000 trucks in Ismailia, in the region of the canal, and there was more than 4,000 trucks in the Rafah border, with food rotting, with medicine rotting, and not being allowed in by in the Sinai by the Egyptian government, and Rafah border by Israel. So it was very sad to see that people were needing so much food and medicine, and that was rotting in the desert. And we left that experience very, very frustrated. And then we tried with the flotilla mission. So in April, we had in Istanbul more than 1,000 people from over 30 countries with 5,500 tons of food and medical aid. And when we were about to board, the eve that we were about to board, the Israeli government made pressure in the countries that gave us the flags for our boats, and they took away our flags, and we could not sail. And it was so frustrating, and we all had to get back home. And then in August, we tried again in a smaller boat that left Norway, and in over 3 months, traveled through over 10 countries in Europe, crossed the Mediterranean, entered the Mediterranean, and we were sailing to Gaza. I was on board that boat, and then we had so many technical problems, so many difficulties, that small boat didn't manage to go there as well. What we call the Handala boat, and now it's being fixed, and it's not a good sailing season for such a small boat to go to Gaza on the strip. So we are fixing it, and we have many missions for 2025, but I didn't manage to enter Gaza as well from the west, from the sea. And then right now, 2 weeks ago, I was in Lebanon as well, trying to cover the violence that the Zionists were making in Lebanon. And if there was a possibility, I would also try to enter and go from the north, but of course this way is way shut. And I could say that I tried to enter Gaza from all directions, but so far I didn't manage. But I'm sure not only me, but so many people from the solidarity movement that dreams about going to Gaza will someday go into a liberated Gaza. I'm sure of that. I'm not sure when, but we will keep on doing the best we can until then. And what I could say is that I've been to most of the historical Palestine, not Gaza yet, but inshallah soon.
Tiago, what you talk about is not easy actually. So,
Yes.
do you feel that you are fighting for Palestine?
Yes, definitely.
Mm,
I try to show people that the life of an activist is never easy
yeah.
because there's so many consequences for what we do. Family consequences, professional consequences, safety and security consequences. But it is worth it because we know that we are fulfilling our purpose in life. I see so many people all around the world, and they feel so lost. They feel like, what are they doing with their lives? Like they go to work and they stay 1 hour on the bus to go to work, 1 hour to get back home, and when they get back home, there's TV advertisement and so many things try to distract them from living real life. And then people wonder, what am I here for? And it's so good when we see that life is a lot more than that, to sell our workforce for someone and then only have to live to work to pay the
Yes.
bills. And once you find your purpose in life, it doesn't have to be this one. I'm lucky. I'm actually very happy that my purpose in life, I understand, is to fight for social justice and fight to change the world. But people can find different purposes in life. I believe this is our destination as humanity. And once I found it, I said, this is the most dignified life I could ever live. And that's what I want to do. And so I said, it is very hard. It has very tough consequences. It is fighting, actually, although many of the times we use nonviolent tactics. For example, in the flotilla, it's a nonviolent direct action because we see this as a necessity to show how oppressive the Zionist regime is. But we also support, whenever there are colonized people resisting for their rights, we will always support that because people deserve to live free. So I can say we are fighting. Many people
You
fighting
feel
with.
this responsibility.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I sure feel. I actually believe that every generation that comes after us is gonna talk about this moment when
Mm.
there was such a major geopolitical shift in the world, from a unipolar world shifting to a multipolar world, and where the unipolar forces and imperialist forces were not trying not to give up their privilege and their hegemony, and they were creating so much violence around the world. And they will talk about as well and how this all converged into a genocide in Palestine, and how the world reacted to that in a global uprising. And people will talk about this, and in the middle of environmental global disaster as well. So there's so many things converging right now that I'm sure that every generation from now on, we're going to talk about this moment, and they're going to ask, what was people doing by then? And all the time when I think things are hard, when I think that I'm physically tired, I try to think, when my daughter asks me about this, I want to be able to say that I did everything I could. When my granddaughter asks me about this, I want to be able to say that I did everything I could. And I want them to tell their daughters and their granddaughters that someone a long time ago did everything he could for this moment. So I feel that we are all responsible for this. We are fulfilling our generation mission right now. So whenever things are hard, I try to understand what we are doing is the most important thing we could be doing in this historical time. And this gives me
Tiago,
strength.
regarding to your family, and you have a little daughter,
Yes.
but still your life, most of your life, still for Palestine.
Yes. My
Ha-
family supports that as well. Actually,
okay.
my wife is also an activist, and
Mm.
we organized our life. We met from this. We met doing
Okay.
solidarity action.
This is good.
So yes, it's very nice. It's very nice when your family supports and walk with you the same purpose in life. And when we
Yeah.
decided to have children, we said it's not an easy world to come. It's not an easy world to live, but we cannot also give up on the idea of living happiness. We cannot give up on the idea of spreading hope in many ways. And so we said, if we can bring a child into this world to be some type of healing for the world as well, and to be part of the solution, why not? So we decided to have children, even very hard circumstances, and we've been having a lot of trouble to organize life
Yeah.
in a situation like this. But we still find so much love and so much joy in everything we do.
And on the other hand, a lot of challenges of
Yes.
facing the Zionist lobby. So
Yes.
there's a risk.
Yes, it's very hard because my baby was not even born and she had so many death threats on her. So
Mm.
it's so sad to see that when October 2023 came and I did those videos that went viral, millions of views, saying the truth, saying that it was not about that day, about that moment, but it was about colonization and apartheid, was about genocide and ethnic cleansing for over 75 years by then, now it's 77 years, and it was about uh, uh, an ideology of racial supremacy, which is Zionism, and those videos went so viral, and but also the death threats came and so many things. And actually, although the traditional media, the media outlets, which are all Zionists in Brazil, they blocked me from everything, and they blocked every Palestinian solidarity activist, every Palestinian from the diaspora in Brazil. No one would get an interview on the major media outlets in Brazil. But the major podcasts, they wanted the audience, so they invited me to go and debate the Zionists on that. And I said, they lie. They have no values on that. They are trained to do that, but I still have to accept because I know the audience of this podcast never heard the truth about Palestine. So I accepted to go, but this had huge consequences because there were so many death threats, so many tough things, so many lawfare against me, so many smear campaigns. So it was tough for me and for my family because my baby wasn't even born. My wife was 7 months pregnant, and she had to sleep out of her home because of the death threats to bomb our house. And I had to go to a podcast. Imagine, I was going to a podcast to debate a Zionist, and I was going on an armored car with police and security beside me. And then I was in another city. I'm from Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, but I was in Sao Paulo for the podcast recording. So I had to sleep in the mosque because the only people that would provide security for me was the Arab and Islamic community in Brazil. So they would invite me to say, Tiago, you have to come sleep with us in the mosque here. It was so amazing because the only mosque I have been before was Al Quds. And
Oh.
then I started to get to know the mosques in Brazil, and they took me to all those cities and said, we need you to talk about Palestine. We need you to encourage our youth, our community to talk more. And so they would invite me. They would put me to sleep on the mosque in every city in Brazil. In the last 14 months, I've been to 15 different countries and 40 different cities, spreading the message. And wherever I am, even here and any other countries, they are the ones taking care of me, and they're so mindful. And I discovered so many things, so many good things about Islam as well, because I I only I only knew about Islam is that it was a religion that was not the violent religion that the Zionists say,
Yes.
but in a religion that must be respected. But I had no idea it was a religion of so much love and justice and
Meanings.
so many good values, so many good community values as well, so many good things. So it amazed me to see how the Islamic community is a kind community and a welcoming community as well.
You are involving in the Palestinian activities years ago, but after 7th October, what has changed?
The main thing that changed is that if it was not for the specific possibility of spreading a message that broke the media blockade, nothing would have changed.
Yeah.
So they would have said the same lies they did in 2003 in the Iraq war, that there were weapons of mass destruction, that there were violent people, Islamic people, that they are violent by nature, and all those things that they always said, and all the things that they always said about Palestine as well, nothing would have changed. But what changed was the communicators from Gaza, the journalists, and everyday people that filmed the destruction. They filmed sometimes their own deaths or the deaths of their own family, and that changed the world and changed world history. Because once they managed for this message and those videos to escape the media blockade, people would never believe what the media was saying, and that went viral everywhere. So people would see that once they were saying that this was a new Holocaust against the Jewish people, and look how violent they are, how violent the Palestinians are, people see that they were bombing children. The same thing I seen in 2006. They were bombing children, they were bombing hospitals, they were starving people as a weapon of war, and that we were using prohibited weapons. They were committing the worst war crimes I've ever seen. So the communications from Gaza, they changed the world forever, because from that, a whole wave of solidarity came, and what I could never imagine, that we would have a social majority in the world that is pro-Palestine. And this is something that the Zionists will never be able to overcome, because right now, out of 8 billion people in the world, most of them support Palestine. And this is a victory, an amazing victory, that they had almost more than 70 years of Zionist propaganda and the Hasbara, and they lost this battle because the youth that woke up to the lies that the Zionists told, and even the Jewish community, the Jewish youth in the United States and everywhere else, they understood that they were lied to their whole lives. They will never again believe the same lies that they believed before. So the real thing that changed is that we broke the ideological gates of the Hasbara and the brainwashing, and that made people go into a global uprising. So the problem is that although we have a social majority right now that is pro-Palestine, we don't have control of the nation states. So the people wants to do stuff, but the nation states, they have their limits and they have their agreements and they have their status quo that they want to maintain in some ways. So what we're seeing right now is the social majority trying to push the nation states to do more, and to, like the South African apartheid, to actually isolate this hateful regime. But we didn't manage to get the material force enough to stop that so far. But we are advancing in many places. But the problem is that the oppressors, they also have their tools. So they're trying to improve control of the masses, improve control of the media, improve boycott and control of the algorithms, improve lawfare, and so many things. So it's an ongoing battle. But what changed after October 7th is that never again they will have the social majority of the world believing their lies. Now we only don't have the means, but we have the conscience of what we need to do, and we're moving forward.
Now, I'm seeing that a lot of activists starting to think about a community, a global community of resistance. And I think this is a new idea, actually.
Yes, it's something amazing to see,
Yeah.
because I've been mobilizing people for almost 2 decades. So I've been thinking about what drives people. Is it fear? Is it anger? And by the end, I've seen that those things mobilize for a while, but they don't mobilize for life. What mobilizes people for life is hope. When they have hope that the life they can live afterwards is much better than this one, then the possibilities of fulfilling their dreams and living a complete life in any sense they believe is what drives them to stay for longer on this. Because and after I realized this, I said, okay, so we have to show the end of this. We have to show what would be a free Palestine and a free world for people. But since we cannot achieve that so far, we also need to have those quick wins. So the boycotting wins, the sanction wins, it's very important to spread to people. But even that is hard to get those wins. So there's a win that happens all the time, which is whenever you're fighting, you're getting in touch with people and you're creating relations that are very different than social relations we create through capitalist society, because it's relations based on camaraderie, it's based on solidarity. So it's not based on competition, so it's based on cooperation. So we are building those communities of resistance by then, and that is the first and most amazing win that a person can have by joining the solidarity movement. So we didn't manage to stop the genocide yet. We didn't manage to isolate completely this hateful regime yet. But we are growing bigger and we're growing stronger each day. So this is already a very important win. And once people realize that, they realize that they are way stronger than they thought, because neoliberalism makes you think that you are nothing and you only work. Your only use is to work and to buy stuff and to consume and to compete against the person right beside you to see who can have more material goods. And actually, when you're joining a solidarity movement, you see that you actually have an amazing power within you, which is
Yeah.
to change history. But there is this secret that this power can only be activated through collectivity, through a community. So this is something amazing to see, that whenever the end of our walk is far, the community building, the resistance community building is already the first starting point and the first victory that we have. And that will never be taken away from people. So people are losing a lot of things. Many people losing their jobs, many people losing so many things,
Yeah.
losing family members, losing friends, because they understand ideologically what's going on and they don't connect with the values anymore. But we are gaining a lot more.
What the price that you have paid because of your working and activities for Palestine?
It's been tough. My security is definitely some price that I've paid. So because of the Freedom Flotilla, is such a thing that is so on in the spotlight of Zionist persecution. Whenever I travel, it's very hard because I'm used to, in every airport I go, I'm interrogated. So I pretty much I mostly lose my connection flights because whenever I get to an imperialist country, they hold me to interrogation. It takes a while to release me, and I lose my connection flight. I have to get another flight.
Okay.
It's very sad, actually, when I'm traveling, even with my family. I organize solidarity missions to other countries as well, to Cuba, for example. So I was taking a huge group of people to Cuba, and when we were coming home, there was policemen from, we believe it was Mossad, and they took me away off the plane and through interrogation. I was with my family and my baby, and people get so scared because of my security as well. So this is quite bad. The lawfare is quite bad because it takes a lot of energy from us to defend ourselves from totally fraudulent accusations, because they try to say that we're anti-Semitic, but I actually defend religious tolerance everywhere, and I don't think at all that this is a problem of the Jewish people as an ethnic group or as a religious group. I'm sure actually the reference that I have from the Jewish people are the Jewish youth that occupied the Statue of Liberty or occupied the Capitol in the United States against Zionism. So the reference that we see from the Jewish community is that they are rejecting Zionism, and they're doing something very important, which is to reject the colonial European project, which is the state of Israel, the Zionist entity itself. So they accuse us of anti-Semitism, but in the end we are anti-imperialist and anti-colonialist. And this is actually a virtue. It's not a problem. It's something that all the peoples in the world should be doing.
Okay. On the other hand, what did you get?
In the end, I got, first of all, it's the sense that we are feeling our life's purpose. This is something that it's the biggest reward anyone can get of their energy and their time in this world. Because whenever we are not doing that, and whenever I was not doing that, I felt so lost in life, and I felt like my life didn't have much meaning, and life was kind of sad. And afterwards, after I understood the injustice in the world, I had two options. I would understand that and do nothing. I would get sick and depressed, or I would mobilize and I would channel all of this into energy to do more. And then I decided to do this. So to understand that I'm fulfilling my purpose in life, it's something that is the biggest reward a person can have in the sense of how they live their lives. So this is the biggest reward I have, but also the community that we build. There's so many people. I met the most courageous and amazing and generous and kind people that I ever thought I would meet. And I met them in so many countries, and I've seen that in so many countries we have so many inspiring people, and we learn from each other every day. We share, we try to create a new society right now, even the conditions are not good, but between ourselves, we are already building the society of tomorrow. So this is something that amazes me every day. Whenever I have the honor and the privilege to take my daughter, my 11-month-old daughter, to an indigenous community, or to a solidarity demonstration for Palestine, or to a mosque, or to anywhere else, I see that it is worth all the efforts. It's worth it.
Okay. What kind of campaigns or movements, in your opinion, you see that we have to improve to make a real pressure
Yes.
on the governments to stop supporting Israel?
Yes. There's the challenge that there are different types of government. There are governments that are totally complicit, like we see the United States and the German government, the UK government, for
Yeah.
example. They are associates of this genocide. The the Zionist entity could never do that. It was not for U.S. bombs. 85% of the bombs that are thrown in Gaza comes from the United States. So they're associates in that. So that's a totally different type of struggle that you have to make. But there are other countries like Brazil, where I live in, that we have a lot of people solidarity. We actually have a president which has a history of solidarity with Palestine, which is Lula, which was one of the first presidents to say that this is a genocide. This is a war against women and children. And he was so harassed by that from the Zionists in Brazil that actually tried to impeach him in Congress because of this statement. But also we have this contradiction that although we have a president that is sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, the structure of
Yeah.
the Brazilian state works in the interests of imperialism and Zionism. So Brazil is still the fourth biggest oil provider to the Zionist war machine. And Brazil also still has military contracts with Elbit Systems, for example, for drones and for rifles and for armored cars and those things. We still have those spy softwares from the time of Bolsonaro and Netanyahu, great friends because they are all
Yeah.
come from fascist ideologies. So we still have all this rooted in Brazilian society. So each country has a different challenge. Most of the countries we are fighting the hypocrisy because it's not about lip service. It's not about just saying that you support Palestine. You have to do concrete actions to do that. Most of the countries, they are in this situation. There are some other countries that are associates in the genocide that needs to do a lot more. But I've seen people doing a lot more. I always say that the Freedom Flotilla is one of the tactics that we have in the same strategy for liberation,
Yes.
but it's also connected to people disrupting armed factories and destroying armed factories all over the world. We see a lot of that in the United Kingdom, for example, but all over the world this is happening. It's also connected to dock workers that refuse to load ships
Mm-hmm.
with arms to Israel. It's connected to airport workers from Brussels who refuse to load planes with cargo to Israel. It's also connected to Yemeni people blocking boats on the Red Sea. It's connected to college students making encampments, connected to people going to protest in the streets, connected to professors and communicators on the internet producing podcasts and free information
Yes.
everywhere. All of those things are doing a very important work, and we are all connected to that. We have to improve that a lot. That's why we insist on the C missions, because we really believe that right now we need to disobey more the status quo. We need to escalate our capacity to resist destruction. So in the Freedom Flotilla, we actually believe that once we can disobey the status quo of the international community, which failed Palestine, the Security Council failed Palestine, the International Court of Justice failed Palestine, even the ICC with arrest warrant for Netanyahu, but still failed Palestine. So we really believe that we can do more, and we believe that if we can, with our sea missions, break the siege of Gaza and create a humanitarian corridor, this could be a game changer, like the defeat of the South African apartheid against Angola and Namibia with solidarity, create a rift, create such a hole in the system of apartheid that in the end brought it to an end. We really believe that if the whole world goes together and breaks the siege of Gaza and goes inside Gaza, this would change stuff, because it would not be like 3 or 10 humanitarian workers that Israel is bombing right now in Gaza. Then bomb them every week. Will be like 1,000 people from all the countries in the world. This is something they could not stand. To the crisis they would be getting into by killing us on our boats. It's something that it could happen, of course, but
Yes.
but it's something that they will never recover from that. So it is a mission that is worth it.
Tiago, actually, you're inspiring me, by the way. So I have to ask, How do you raise your hope despite of this genocide and all of what's happened in the world?
You know, I always try to remember Gandhi's words about it. He said that whenever he was feeling down about situations, he remembered that all throughout history we had empires and we had dictators and we have a lot of violence and hate. But in the end, the way of peace and love and justice always prevailed. So whenever I look at history, the history of revolutions, the history of the working class, the history of the people when they gather together for a purpose, I see the immense potential that we have. And I really believe that we will make amazing changes in society. And I try to think that if people from our past, they did that, we have the same strength to do it. So whenever I'm feeling down, I try to read more the history of revolution and go into inspiring people that defeated those hateful regimes. I try to Palestinian cause is very connected to the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, but also connected to the history of people defeating other hateful regimes like fascism, like Nazism, so many things. So there's so many ways to inspire ourselves. I always try to inspire myself in the life of revolutionaries, amazing people, and the Palestinian people have so many revolutionaries that we can inspire from. And whenever just listening and reading about history is not working completely, I try to go to culture and art, like Mahmoud Darwish, for example, and a lot of people. And it's amazing to see that we have so many ways of gaining energy from. And I always try to do that. Whenever I'm sad, I go to our past and the people that brought this flag of liberation so far, and they gave it to us. Now it's our turn to carry it, and we do the best we can.
Actually, thank you so much, Thiago Ávila, for your hope and for your fighting for Palestine. Thank you so much.
I'm very glad to be doing this, and I consider that we are all doing this together in many, many ways.
Maybe one day we're going to go together to Palestine.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you.